Hello everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, and recorder of videos. Welcome to my board game video review series, RogueWatson Reviews. With this video, we're going to be taking a look at Dice Throne. Dice Throne is a 2 to 6 player dice chucking game by Mind Bottling Games, though they have since partnered with Roxley. The designers Nate and Manny ran a successful Kickstarter campaign in January 2017 after a debut at PAX South, which is when I first saw the game. I spoke to Nate and Manny again at PAX South 2018 as they were gearing up for the official launch of Dice Throne in January 2018, as well as a Kickstarter campaign for the Season 2 expansion, which comes with new characters, which I believe debuts February 14th. Now let's take a look at Dice Throne.
At its core, Dice Throne is a combination of Magic the Gathering, Yahtzee, and a tabletop RPG. Players take turns rolling dice to activate RPG-like abilities to attack their opponents, while using cards to upgrade those abilities and manipulate their and their opponents' dice rolls. The base game comes with 6 unique fantasy characters, which all come with their own game board and character sheet, which shows what their dice facings are, as well as explains what their various status effects do. I'll briefly go through them all here. There's the Moon Elf, who's all about debuffing and inflicting negative status effects. The Paladin, who's all about buffing himself and making himself stronger. The Barbarian, who's very straightforward, just raw damage and self-healing. The Monk, who's all about balancing chi and using chi tokens for offense and defense. The Pyromancer, the Glass Cannon, all about offense, able to burn, knock down, stun, and build up her fire mastery for even more damage. And the Shadow Thief, who's a very complex hero who has to build up his pool of combat power to deal lots of damage later in the game. I'm a big fan of this fantasy artwork, which is featured prominently on all the components. Each character comes with their own game board, which is where you upgrade and activate your abilities based on the dice that you roll. You need to roll the right combination depicted on the board to activate an ability. For example, if you want to activate the Paladin's Mighty Prayer, you would need to roll the Paladin's dice and hope you get the right combination of facings. And not all dice sets are created equal. See, the Paladin has 2 swords and 2 helmets, as well as the Life and the Prayer, whereas the Pyromancer actually has 3 flame facings for 1, 2, 3. The dice also have numbers on them, so you can activate large and small straights. Now, I have mixed feelings about the insert. It works well in organizing the different characters, dice, cards, and tokens. You can easily just pop out a tray and give that to the player. The dice are high quality, including both icons and numbers. Looks very, very nice. I really, really like these dice a lot. And also, they have a combat power dial, which goes up to 15, and a health dial that lets you easily keep track of your character's health. Kind of a double dial. Just really neat components. I love that the art is different on each component. So let's pull out the Pyromancer so I can show you just how impressive this is. You can see here you've got her art depicted in the middle of the game board, which just looks absolutely fantastic. I love it. But you've got the artwork, and it's a different pose, same character, also on all the other components. So like there's the character sheet. It's also on the combat power dial. Again, it's the artwork but different. And on the health dial and on the card backings of her personal deck. So it really brings home the theme and flavor that you're playing that character when all the various components show it off. Each character also gets a nice turn order card that explains what you can do during each phase. It's kind of like Magic the Gathering, where you need to know what phase you're in to determine which cards you can play and actions you can take, but it is a lot less fiddly as well. The cards themselves are color-coded for what phase you can play them in, so blue cards are usually upgrades or ways to heal yourself or maybe grant some CP, whereas orange cards can be played during the roll phase to manipulate dice rolls on you or your opponent's rolls. And then you have red cards, which can just be played anytime, like instants. Most of the blue cards are upgrades. For example, you would play 2 CP to upgrade your combustion to level 2. You would then place that card directly on top of the game board, replacing that ability, and now you've got an upgraded ability. So it's a fun RPG-like system. Because games play so quickly, you'll probably only upgrade maybe 2 to 4 abilities per game. It doesn't happen too often, and you're at the mercy of what cards you draw, but it does add a lot of replayability. Now, when it's time to attack, each player receives up to 3 total rolls. Hard quality dice, and let's roll. You can see here I rolled a 2 4s, a 5, and a 6. My best bet here is to, I think I can activate Combustion. As you can see here, you would need a fire. Let's see what these are actually called. Flame, Blaze, Fiery Soul, and Meteor. So with a Flame, Blaze, a Fiery Soul, and a Meteor, with 4 dice, I don't even need to re-roll, and I can activate my Combustion attack. So now my opponent can use cards to manipulate my dice rolls to change some of the facings or force me to re-roll, or they can accept the attack, and then they would roll their defensive roll. And depending on the character, they can respond by gaining new abilities, status effects, or damaging me right back. Status effects also play a large role in Dice Throne. Each of the heroes has different positive and negative statuses they can inflict, represented by these various tokens. So like the Pyromancer has a burn effect, and these are all going to be listed on your game board. For example, with Pyroblast, it deals 6 damage, and you can roll 1 dice. And if that dice is a flame, you deal another 3 damage. If it's a blaze, you can inflict burn. With Fiery Soul, you gain 2 fire mastery, and with Meteor, you inflict knockdown. So some abilities have even more randomness after selecting the ability. And all these status effects are represented by these tokens that you would then place on that player's board. The Pyromancer has a lot of these Fire Mastery tokens to place on her own board to build up her damage, which is, again, listed on many of her abilities. Now, there are also a lot of ways to get rid of status effects using cards, or even transfer bad status effects back to your opponent. Again, you're at the mercy of the card draw. But for example, if you get poison, you could play a card that would then inflict your poison on an opponent, which works really well and adds to the funness of using the cards. Some of the characters are very status effect heavy, like the Moon Elf, while others have almost none, like the Barbarian. So there's a lot of variation options depending on the character you're playing and how deeply you want to go into using status effects. When you're done rolling and selecting an ability, your opponent then gets to roll his or her defensive roll. So for example, the Moon Elf can roll 5 dice, and if she rolls 2 feet, which I believe is a 4 or a 5, then she can have that incoming damage. And for every 2 bow facings she rolls, she can deal 1 damage back to her opponent. So it's a nice way of letting a player be actively involved during their opponent's turn. You can also play orange cards to change the results. So for example, Better D says target player can re-roll their defensive roll phase, which you could use on yourself to try for better results, or on your opponent to hope for worse results by forcing a re-roll. So for example, if I attacked the Moon Elf and she rolled the 2 feet, I could play Better D, which causes 0 CP, and force her to re-roll and hopefully not hit that combination and have my incoming damage. Alright, so here I've set up a sample 2-player game between the Barbarian and the Moon Elf, who are noted in the rulebook as being the easiest characters to play. Starting health is at 50, starting combat points are at 2. We've shuffled our decks and we've drawn 4 cards. The Barbarian is going first, and so skips his income phase. So I've drawn, oh boy, a lot of card drawing cards. Wow. So let's go ahead and spend 1 CP to draw 2 cards and see what we have to work with. That's a lot of nice upgrade cards here. They all cost CP. Now, anytime during your main phase, you can sell cards for 1 CP each. And we're going to let's upgrade our Sturdy Blow for 1 CP. So we move our dial down to 0. And we place our upgrade card right on top of the ability on our game board, which leaves us with 0 CP. We didn't really get any good instant or roll cards other than another card draw, so I'm not too worried about needing the CP on my opponent's turn. Alright, that finishes our main phase, and we move into our roll phase. This is the fun part. Roll the dice! Oops. Alright, so we've got 3 swords, what is that symbol? A POW? Which is a 6, and there's a cat. Hello, cat. No, that's a heart, a 4. Let's see, with 3 swords, we could activate Smack. In order to get our new sturdy blow, we need another POW symbol. We already have the 2 swords, so we do get 2 more rolls. So let's try to turn one of these into a POW. And we got it! We got the POW! I have another roll, though I don't really, well, you know, we could go for Overpower if we get another 6. Let's try that. Not so much. Now, if I had an orange card, let me re-roll or change some of those into wilds. We could try to go for more powerful abilities. Instead, for now, we're going to go with our Sturdy Blow 2, which deals 5 undefendable damage. Undefendable means my opponent cannot roll their defensive rolls, so she would take 5 damage. There we go. And I get one last main phase after my rolls where I could sell more cards or upgrade more abilities. I don't have any CP, so I'm going to hang on to my cards and end my turn. Alright, it is now the Moon Elf's turn. The Moon Elf starts with 4 cards. On her income phase, she gains 1 CP and draws 1 card. She has a nice variety of upgrades, dice rolling cards, and a defensive ability upgrade. Those are very handy. It's always tricky to decide what to upgrade as you never know what you're going to roll any given turn. Let's see. Defensive roll is good. Exploding shot is good. Demising arrow. Let's me inflict. Targeting. Targeting effect early on would be pretty great. You know what? We're going to spend our 2 CP and upgrade our demising shot. So we'll go down to 1 CP, which we could save to spend on volley or better D during our roll phase. It's good to hang on to CP for those opportunities. Alright, let's roll. Okay, we have 3 arrows, 1 moon, and a foot. And we need 1 more moon to hit our new demising shot upgrade, so we're going to go for that. Didn't get it. We have 1 more re-roll. Yes, we got it! Look at that! Alright, 3 bows and 2 moons activates our demising shot, which inflicts targeted, then deals 6 damage. Let's see what targeted means. Look on our chart here. When a player afflicted with this token is damaged as the result of an opponent's offensive roll phase, add +2 to the damage. And it's persistent, which means that effect stays on there. So we would add our token to our barbarian opponent. We deal 6 +2 is 8 total damage incoming to the barbarian. Now the barbarian has a chance to alter or prevent that damage with cards, but remember we didn't get any of those orange cards, so he's down to rolling his defensive roll. His defensive roll states he has to roll 3 dice, and every heart lets him heal 2 points of damage. So we'll roll 3 dice. I didn't roll any hearts, so he doesn't heal anything and takes a full 8 points of damage. Now the Moon Elf can still spend CP to upgrade any abilities or sell for cards to gain CP, but I think she's going to save her cards to see how the Barbarian responds. And that's what a sample turn looks like.
Dice Throne definitely feels primarily designed for head-to-head one-on-one battles with both players battling against each other, rolling defensive rolls, being able to play cards against each other. It does technically scale for up to 6 players if you want to use every single class that comes in the box. I don't think it particularly scales well for the upper echelons of 5 or 6 players just because there's not a lot to do when it's not your turn and you're not being directly attacked. There are rules for playing free-for-all, which I'll get into in my pros and cons. I don't think they work quite as well as the teams, which does work well, at least for lower teams, so like 2-on-2. But I think you want to primarily play it 1-on-1 and maybe throw in a little 2-on-2 if you have the players. Now with dice being the primary mechanic, balance is obviously going to get a bit wonky on times, especially because you're mainly limited to the dice rolls you get as well as the cards that you draw. However, the cards that you draw many times will let you manipulate those dice rolls, so there is a lot of strategy there. Also, of all the games I've played, I never wins through about a third of my deck, so it's going to matter a big deal on what cards you're actually drawing, and I guess that adds a lot to the replayability as well. Games played very quickly, about 15 to 30 minutes, and that's if, and a lot of it depends on the character. Some of the characters, like the Pyromancer, you really want to play it and end the game as quickly as possible because you are a glass cannon, whereas the Shadow Thief, you want to bide your time and build your power up and then unleash some devastating combos at the end. I've also been pleasantly surprised by how well balanced it is, despite relying on the randomness of the dice and the cards. Almost every game I've played has come down to the wire. It's been less than 10 health on the opponent's side. And it is all very entirely possible to both get killed at the end because of an opponent's defensive roll, retaliating and actually ending you. And the winner is not who kills whom, it's who survives, which is an important rule to note. All right, let's go over my quick pros and cons for Dice Throne.
Pro, there's 6 unique characters in the base game, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. They all have very distinct play styles. You could play as someone that's enjoys screwing with your opponent with status effects, or somebody that's just pure raw strength, or somebody that bides their time. It's just a lot of good strategy and variation, and it's a lot of fun to play these characters. That leads to my next pro. There's fantastic artwork for each of these characters on all of the different components. They all match really well, from the health dial to the backing of the cards, and yet they're all unique, distinctive art, like different poses for each character, which is really great. Nice looking art. Pro, Dice Throne really has the perfect mix of strategy and randomness. Now, with a dice throwing game, obviously you're going to get a lot of randomness in there with what abilities you can actually inflict, and obviously you're drawing cards, so that changes depending on which cards you draw. However, it really ends up balancing quite nice with all the various abilities and even the characters being so distinctive and unique. There's a lot, you can tell a lot of work went into balancing this, almost to the, the level of that an RPG would, with different characters and stats going. So I've been very impressed and pleasantly surprised with how well balanced the game has been. That being said, con, Dice Throne doesn't scale as well for large groups, and particularly free-for-all can be very unbalanced. Now, there's a rule, the rule in the rulebook when you're playing free-for-all is that you actually have to go through a targeting phase after your offensive roll. So you roll your offensive roll, you select what ability you want, then you roll a dice to determine which opponent you're actually attacking. That's kind of a fair way of doing it, but it also leaves it up to randomness, and you could easily have one player just get ganged up on through no fault of anyone, and suddenly they're eliminated. So it kind of creates some rough feelings there. I do know that I spoke to Nate and Manny at PAX South, and they were discussing a rebalance of the of that rule to where it create more of a King of the Hill scenario, where instead you would be incentivized to attack the strongest player by letting you draw a card if you attack the person that's strongest, instead of leaving it person with the most health, instead of leaving it up to chance like that. So they're trying to work with it. They understand that that's maybe not the best rule. I would just state that I would stick to Dice Throne for 1-on-1 or 2v2. If you have 3 people, just note that there may be some issues with balancing for free-for-all. In larger groups, I just think there's better games out there for larger groups to come together, and would make people be able to do more, because it's so hard. You can't really plan your turn out ahead of time very much, since you have to rely on those dice rolls so much. And con, there's no artwork on the cards themselves. There's just kind of big text. So that's fine. There's so much great art on all the other components. And what's cool is that this is another weakness that they're going to shore up with future releases and expansion content for Dice Throne, is that they will have artwork, really nice looking artwork, just like the other components, right there on the cards themselves, which will look really cool for future releases. So very impressive that both my cons are actually being actively addressed by the developers.
Final thoughts for Dice Throne. Rolling dice is fun, RPGs are fun, and Dice Throne is a fun combination of those fun things. You won't be able to necessarily plan out your turn very well, but there's a lot of fun risk-reward management with rolling the dice and trying to hit different abilities, as well as knowing which cards to hold on to, when to play those cards. So there's still plenty of strategy and depth involved, even though the primary mechanic is rolling dice. The artwork is really fantastic. I love that it's spread out amongst all the different components. The components themselves are very nice. The insert is nice, although you can't jostle it around because then things go flying everywhere. You might want to invest in some little baggies for the tokens at the very least. But I do love that the art is really, really good, and it's printed on all the various characters. You really feel like you're playing as that particular character. And the characters that come with the box are really fun. There's a nice variety there. There's really straightforward, easy ones, which aren't necessarily weaker. It's just the strategy is more straightforward versus some really complex heroes that rely on a lot of strategy with debuffs or buffing themselves or trying to hide and bide their time and then come back with a big power play at the end of the game. So I like that there's a variety there. It also wants me wanting more heroes, though. I could definitely see how easily it is to expand this just by adding those little expansions coming in Season 2, where you can easily add a new set of dice and cards and character board, and boom, you've got a whole nother character to play. So a lot of real fun replayability with the different characters. Dice Throne leaves me very impressed, and it's already looking like a solid tabletop Game of the Year contender for 2018. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. For more news, reviews, previews on board games, video games, and tabletop RPGs, you can check out my website at RogueWatson.com, as well as right here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.